This whiskey from the Glenfarclas distillery in Speyside is both 185 years and 6 decades in the making. Let's try this whiskey. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about the Glenfarclas distillery in the Speyside region of Scotland. Now, Glenfarclas is one of very few family-owned or privately owned distilleries in Scotland, and it has a really long and proud history. And the bottle to my left is all about that history. This is the Glenfarclas 185th anniversary bottling. Now, it's bottled at 46% alcohol. It's natural color. I don't know if it's chill filtered or not. However, it should be made almost entirely of ex-Oloroso casks. There was only about 6,000 bottles of it made because it's quite a limited run. And the entire concept behind this bottle was to bring together casks from different decades of Glenfarclas's distillation history. So there's whiskeys from 6 different decades in this bottle, but they're using the know-how from 185 years of Glenfarclas history. So with that, we know that there's at least a minimum of some proportion of 52-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey in this bottle, which is a really cool thing to think about. Imagine how expensive it would be to buy a 52-year-old single malt. Maybe some of you don't have to imagine. Maybe you have one sitting on your shelf right now. But, and taking what is good of the old whiskey, the aged whiskey, and of the young whiskey, and putting it together to see if you can take the best attributes from both worlds. Really interesting concept. So when they were picking these casks for this vatting, they went ahead and they picked only a couple casks at a time. And they went ahead and they vatted those casks. And slowly, over a process of 2 years, they went about marrying all of these casks from these 6 decades to make sure they really meshed well. And it's a process that I think is really well thought, instead of just pouring them all in a vat at the same time and bottling it right away. So really interesting whiskey and something that I needed to get my hands on. So I want to dive into the history of Glenfarclas a little bit, and we'll get right to the tasting notes. The Glenfarclas distillery in Speyside was founded in 1836. However, distilling on the site goes back as far as 1791. Now, Robert Hay was the original founder of Glenfarclas, and he founded it on his farm. Now, he passed away in 1865. However, his neighbor, John Grant, went ahead and purchased the distillery for £512 at that point. Since then, the distillery has belonged and been owned by the Grant family. So that's about 156 years of ownership when this bottle was released in 2021. That's just downright impressive. Now, in the 1980s, there was a downturn in whiskey production, and most distilleries decreased their production. Glenfarclas, rather counterintuitively, actually went ahead and increased whiskey production. I'm guessing they saw the possibility of, if everyone's doing A, maybe we should do B. That way, if whiskey sales go back up, we'll be primed and ready to deliver the product that everyone wants. And sure enough, they had more well-aged stock laid down, and they had saved a lot of it for single malt bottlings, which gave them an edge competitively over a lot of their competitors. Now, they typically have gotten their casks from the Miguel Martin cooperage in Spain, and they, for the longest time, as far as I can remember, have only used ex-Oloroso casks. Now, I believe there's some PX casks that are out there now, but don't quote me on that. In 1981, they made an interesting decision to go ahead and change from direct fired stills to steam heated stills, which most of the whiskey industry uses. What they found is that there was a major difference in their distillate character once they went ahead and did this. And almost instantly, they made the decision to change back to direct fired stills because they found that the heavier and weightier character, the more robust nature of that distillate did much better in those sherry casks. It suited it much, much better. Now, I just want to cover a couple of the quirks and interesting notes about how Glenfarclas actually makes their whiskey. One of the interesting things that I didn't know is that their malt is actually slightly peated. It's peated anywhere from 1 to 3 phenol parts per million. So I was actually, I had no idea that it was just slightly peated. When we're talking about them laying down a lot of stocks in the 80s when others weren't, their capacity each year is actually 4 million liters per annum. So when you can make that much whiskey, you can definitely get a competitive edge on other distilleries for sure. Of note as well is the way they store their whiskey and what happens to their whiskey while it's being stored. They use a traditional dunnage warehouse, which is a great way to store whiskey as opposed to palletizing it. Now, the microclimate at their warehouse is really unique. It actually allows for extremely small, extremely minuscule angel share of 0.5% a year. Whereas the typical angel share for a Scotch whiskey distillery is anywhere from 1 to 2.5%. Now, this means that they can age their whiskeys for a really long time, a lot longer than some other distilleries, which is good for Glenfarclas and it's definitely good for us. All right, let's get to the fun part here. Let's get to the whiskey. Now, Glenfarclas 185th anniversary bottling. All right, on the nose. Orange, dunnage. Yeah, like orange and like musty oak. I think that's what I'm meaning by dunnage there. I can't wait to actually step foot in a dunnage warehouse. I'm hoping to this summer in Scotland. Oh man, yeah. Raisin with some like nuttiness. So my mind goes instantly to like opening a bag of trail mix. Yeah, this is like reminiscent of something like really refined, like like an old bookstore. Yeah, old books. But I'm getting tea vibes, like orange pekoe tea. Yeah, this is a really dignified nose. I'm really enjoying this. This is, I'll hold that part back. It's reminding me of something. Milk chocolate, Christmas cake like spice with a bit of like boozy fruit. Mulled wine, but without the acidity, which is the only part of glühwein or mulled wine that I don't necessarily always enjoy. A little wood varnish note. Something jammy in there too, almost like a cranberry sauce. Red fruits for sure though. Yeah, really complex and enjoyable nose for a non-age statement whiskey. It must be just because of the older whiskey with some really nice young casks. It's a great balancing act between the wood, the fruit, and the spice. Yeah, I've really enjoyed nosing this whiskey. That's for sure. All right, let's check out the palate. Instantly, raisin, cinnamon, rich leather, really nice body to this, sweet milk chocolate. The orange is still there too, but that was a really quick sip, but from experience, you can chew this whiskey for a really long time and keep picking flavors out. Bit of tobacco, touch of earthiness too. Yeah, tobacco, rich leather. Oh man. Touch of bitter tannin, but it helps to balance the sweetness because again, there's a lot of sweetness coming from the raisin, the stewed fruits, like cooked down fruit. A slight like twiggy note, almost like like a herbal tea. Definitely get like steeped black tea vibes off this. And there's a little bit of a savory note too, like slightly meaty note. That's that heft, I think, from those direct fired stills. Yeah, this is really nice. Really loving this palate. It's a rich palate. And this is the part I was gonna say earlier, but I held back. It's almost a little bit old school. I know that's a dangerous word to start bandying about, throwing around, but definitely an old school feel on the nose and the palate of this whiskey. If I'm talking new school, I'm talking about like Glenfarclas 12 and Glenfarclas 15, Glenfarclas 10 and cask strength. That's like archetypal new style, new school sherry whiskey for me. One more sip and we'll think about the finish on this one. There's that lovely palate again. On the finish, earthy oak, chocolate, kind of like that. If you're in Canada, maybe you know this, like the malt cups, like the malt ice cream cups that you'd have like the wooden spoon that you eat them with. Kind of a combination of that chocolate and the wood, coming from the oak and the chocolate in this. Yeah, like a malt cup. Steeped tea again, steeped black tea. That's consistent throughout. Got that on the nose, got that on the palate. Still here on the finish. So that's a common thread. Yeah, and this profile is just it's tannins, it's wood, it's fruit. It's old and young. I really like this. This is what good blends can do in a whiskey. They can take the best of youth and the best of age, throw it together, and come up with something fantastic on the other side. Now, the finish, I'm gonna say, is a little bit shorter than I would like. With such an excellent nose and a wonderful palate, if there's one thing that lets you down on this whiskey, it's the resolve. It's a little short and a little bit muted, but still, I really love that steeped tea note. It's super enjoyable. One more sip and we'll get to the score. This is exactly the type of Glenfarclas I want to be drinking. Bottled at a respectable ABV, and with a really interesting concept. These 6 decades of Glenfarclas brought together. The palate and nose, as I mentioned, are excellent. I want a bit more from that finish, but you can really tell there's some special casks in here. I really do think the sum of the parts is the whole is greater than the individual parts here. I would love to have another bottle of this. I think this whiskey is worth every bit of 89.5 out of 100. That's the score I'm gonna give it. It's not quite a 90. The finish keeps it from that 90 plateau, that holy grail that everyone's looking for all the time. Everyone wants 90s on their shelves. It's almost there, and maybe if I give this more time, it could get there. If it improves a lot more with more oxidation, more time in the bottle opened, I'll let you guys know. But this is a fantastic performing whiskey, and if you still have it available, there was only 6,000 bottles, I'd suggest picking one up. Not just for the really cool old school label and the awesome old school labels that are just all over the tin here. See if you guys can see that a little bit. Really, really cool, really snazzy here. Yeah, I'm really glad I have this whiskey. I might be a little precious with it unless I can get a second bottle. Now, this presentation really reminded me of another concept, something that came out in 2015 from Tomatin. And that's the Tomatin Contrasts release, where they had bottles, both bourbon matured and sherry matured, that are from the years 1973, 1977, 1988, 1991, 2002, and 2006. So again, whiskeys from 4 different decades, all vatted together for you to compare. And they came in little half bottles, just like this. Like this one here. So this is the bourbon, and this is the sherry. tremendous concept. And I think something I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to drink this one side by side with this at some point and see how they stack up. Thank you once again for joining me here, guys. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Leave a comment down below if you liked this review, what your thoughts are on this whiskey. And if you enjoy Glenfarclas, what is your favorite Glenfarclas release? Is it the 15-year-old? Is it the 105 cask strength? Or are you one of these people that really loves the family cask series that is just so good? Let me know down below. As always, thank you once again for joining me on the West Coast. Sláinte.